Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. The portal will officially close in just a few hours. But what's also interesting is that Tuesday was the deadline for college players to enter the NBA draft. And so that means that if you did not have your paperwork into the NBA, you cannot participate in the NBA draft. You could be the best player in the draft. You could be Reed Sheppard. If you didn't get your information in, if you haven't made an announcement by Tuesday, you cannot enter. And so now there's some technicalities that we'll get into in a minute. But I like that those two deadlines kind of intersect together. I think one of the biggest problems college basketball has, and I think it's an NBA problem as well, is that I think they work independently. And so you have kids that are in the draft process that are waiting, entering the portal. You have kids entering the portal that are waiting to enter the draft. It's like, it's good that it's basically one day you got to make a decision on everything. And that day was Tuesday. And there was some news that we absolutely have to get to. Now, first of all, it's worth noting, probably the biggest name that at least as of 6:51 Eastern time on Tuesday that has entered the portal right before the deadline is Coleman Hawkins, forward from Illinois, who was an all Big Ten player and maybe outside of Terrence Shannon was the most important player on Illinois' Elite Eight team this year. Now, what's interesting about Coleman Hawkins, if you read his statement, it does not seem as though he actually plans on transferring. I thought this was an interesting statement, though. Here's what he said. He said, "My intention is 100% to stay in the draft, and I'm fully focused on the process. I wanted to make sure I take every opportunity to protect myself in case of injury or any other unforeseen circumstances down the road. With the recent NCAA rule change that regarding grad transfers, basically saying that grad transfers have to be in the portal this week. With the recent NCAA rule change regarding grad transfers in the May 1 deadline approaching, entering the portal gives me the best chance to protect myself in those instances and maximize my opportunities as I go through the pre-draft process. I love the University of Illinois, and I am proud to be earning my degree here. I'm forever indebted to Coach Underwood and love playing for him throughout my college career. This was truly one of the best years of my life, and no matter what the future holds, Illinois will always be my home." And so basically, if you listened to that segment, or if you listened to that statement, I should say, it sounds like he's going through the draft process. And by the way, I think it's a smart move by him. What he basically just said was, like, what if I have an injury and I know that I might not get drafted? Like, you never wish for injury. You never want injury. You never expect injury. But there's worse things to do than preparing for the possibility and giving yourself all options. And so as it sounds like 100% focused on the NBA draft, I believe it for this kid. You know, he is an Illinois legend. I believe the stat is Brad Underwood's been there about 6 years. He's the only guy that has played 4 years for Brad Underwood. In other words, a couple guys left early for the pros, Ayu Dosunmu, Kofi Cockburn, and pretty much everybody else couldn't handle the smoke and they got out of town. And Coleman Hawkins is kind of like joke, like, I'm proud to be the only guy that's played 4 years under Brad Underwood. But I just bring it up because to me, it seems like he wants to be prepared. He wants to go pro. He expects to go pro, but he's just leaving his options open. If I need to come back to college, I can come back to Illinois. But if I need to come back to college, I can also have other options as well. Now, last year, he also declared for the draft, and he did wait right down to the wire to withdraw. This year, I do not expect him to. If he somehow did, he is as high of a profile of a player that has entered as anyone that has entered this offseason. 13 points, 7 rebounds. He's a point forward, and he would be very much coveted, very much in demand. Coleman Hawkins, one of the big names to enter right before the draft deadline. Another big name that is absolutely worth noting. If your team needs a big guy, get to know the name JT Toppin. Okay. 6'9", Just finished his freshman year at New Mexico. From the Dallas area. Don't believe he has any relation to Obi Toppin in the NBA. Jacob Toppin, former Kentucky Wildcat. But JT Toppin was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year this past season, okay? And I can tell you, living on the West Coast, I probably watch more Mountain West than most people. Just always have it on in the background at night as I'm doing work. This kid is a beast. True freshman this last year, 12 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks per game in just 26 minutes of play. Super athletic. He's another one that has declared for the NBA draft. I don't think he's quite ready. But if he comes back, I would expect him to be as coveted as any player that's entered the portal, right up there with a Coleman Hawkins, with a Kadari Richmond, with a John L. Davis, with whomever. But I just bring it up because this is a kid who I think is a 2-3 year player at his next school and could be a star. Hard to figure out what would make sense. He's from Texas. Does Texas need a big guy? Does TCU, does SMU need a big guy? But also, school like North Carolina. North Carolina is very much looking for another center. I know they were hoping 1 or 2 big names entered the portal before the deadline. As of right now, that has not happened. And so I just bring it up because it feels to me like this kid is very much going to transfer, and he is going to be very high profile and very in demand. A couple other notes from both the portal and NBA draft deadline. I mentioned it a minute ago, but this one is important to me. And by the way, as you see below, full portal coverage, CBB transfers on Twitter, CBB transfers on Instagram. This one is interesting to me. So DJ Wagner, who has been in the portal, he was not on the NBA draft entry list. That is actually interesting and very important. It means that he is coming back to college for another year, and it sure doesn't seem like he's going back to Kentucky. And so assuming he is not going back to Kentucky, I think he is as high profile of a player as anyone who has entered the portal all offseason. This is a kid, averaged just under 10 points per game, 3.5 assists per game. Now, he wasn't great. He wasn't perfect. 29% shooting from 3, 40% shooting from the field. But a couple things on this kid. One, always thought he got a bad rap. First of all, he was playing really well before he got hurt. Like, I think it's easy to forget that. But you go back to some of the early games in the early part of the rebounds, 5 assists against Carolina. 14 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists against Florida in the SEC opener. 16 points, 1 rebound, 3 assists in a win over Missouri. 18 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists in a game against Texas A&M. And so this was a kid like, I thought he was playing pretty well. Then he got hurt. Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd clearly played better down the stretch. And so when I look at DJ Wagner, I actually give him credit. I thought he was a good teammate. I thought he did what was asked of him. I thought when other players stepped up, he willingly stepped aside. And I am a big believer in DJ Wagner as a player. And so because of it, we'll be curious to see where he goes. Obviously, this past weekend went to visit USC. I don't really see that as a fit. Eric Musselman, listen, Musselman's a dog. He's going to go after the biggest names in the portal. He just actually got a commitment on Tuesday from another marquee player, Terrence Williams, who played at Michigan. But I just bring it up. I see DJ Wagner. He's obviously coming back to college basketball. My guess still feels like Arkansas, not only, of course, because of the John Calipari relationship, but he's obviously very close with Kenny Payne. His grandfather played with Kenny Payne at Louisville back in the day. He almost committed to Kenny Payne out of high school. And so, in my opinion, that is the one that makes the most sense. A couple other notes from the draft deadline, and producer Matt, start rounding up whatever questions we have. Caleb Love, that was an interesting one. He did not get his paperwork in time. Now, I talked to all my Arizona guys. He is testing the draft waters because the list comes out, his name isn't on it, and people start saying, well, does this mean he's definitely coming back? He is testing the draft waters. I believe Hunter Salas is as well.